Hello, my name's Gavin, and this is Genre Books, and today is the unadulterated joy of a book haul. This is the April book haul, all the books I've managed to get during the month of April. Probably got more than I normally would have done, but I did have a birthday during the month. I'll begin with books I either got on my birthday or with gift cards after the event. To continue my Valentine adult fantasy collection building, I've got 3 books, or 1 book in 2 volumes and another book. The book in 2 volumes is The Well at World's End by William Morris. I think possibly the only book I've got by someone who is more famous for their wallpaper than he is for his writing, but I'll be interested to read this, and I think it's written in the 1890s, so right before Victober. Also in Valentine adult fantasy, but probably on more the adventurous side of things than William Morris, is H. Rider Haggard and Andrew Lang's The World's Desire. I believe an Egypt-based adventure. Leaping forward from the 1890s, but only by a decade or so, I have 2 volumes of short stories, voices from the Radium Age, and more voices from the Radium Age. The first volume here has stories by Ruqayyah Sawat Hussain, William Hope Hodgson, E.M. Forster, Arthur Conan Doyle, Jack London, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Neil R. Jones. Neil R. Jones, if anyone's been watching the Planet Stories deep dives I've been doing, is a writer who appears fairly often in the early issues of that magazine. In Volume 2, more voices from the Radium Age, we have George C. Wallace, H.G. Wells, Valery Brusyov, E. Nesbitt, Algernon Blackwood, A. Merritt, George Allen England, May Sinclair, Booth Tarkington. Booth Tarkington, winner of the Pulitzer Prize for 2 years, some point in the 20s or 30s. I'll correct myself on the screen if I've got that wrong. This next book I managed to get for an absolute song, and that is The Gernsback Days, edited by Mike Ashley and Robert A.W. Lowndes. It's a hardback original from 2004 from the Wildside Press. It's brand new and cost less than £10, and this I think is just going to be an absolute treasure trove of information of the early days of the pulps. So something I've fallen into this year, if you'll pardon the pun, is stories about underground societies and Hollow Earth tales and conspiracies and lost worlds, and I picked up on a haul last month the 8th volume in the Shaver Mystery Compendium, detailing all of the stories that Richard Shaver wrote for various science fiction pulp magazines. I'm definitely going to have more to say about this whole period at some point in the future, but what I have to do first is some serious reading around the subject, and to help in that I managed to get hold of Volume 1 of the Shaver Mystery Compendium, Volume 2 of the Shaver Mystery Compendium, and you've guessed it, Volume 3 of the Shaver Mystery Compendium. I'm going to be on the lookout for the remaining volumes, and I'm going to try to get my head around the mythology, the insanity, the lexicography, and the impact of this whole business. But it's not all science fiction and fantasy. It's mostly science fiction and fantasy, but there are other things. For example, as a gift on my birthday, I got one of possibly the best looking Amazon print-on-demand anthologies I've seen, and that is the pulp western anthology Volume 1. This isn't just stuff cobbled together from public domain sources. This looks to be stuff that I can't seem to find elsewhere, but the list of authors is interesting. C. William Harrison, Roland Krebs, Cliff Walters, Philip F. Deere, Howard E. Morgan, Frank Richardson Pierce, Austin Hall, Johnston McCulley, Lee Bond, Lloyd Eric Reeve, and Kenneth Perkins. So I'm going to give this a good go on June on the Range, in June, and if I like what I read here, I'll be looking at the next volumes of these anthologies. And as a bit of an oddity or rarity, I managed to get something from 1989, which seems to have been photocopied and bound. But this is Nick Carr's The Pulp Western Hero. So much for my birthday. This next stack of books was acquired on a trip around a nearby town, one which I hardly ever visit, which I made at the beginning of the month when I had a little time off work, and perusing their charity shops, I managed to pick up this little lot, all for £12. Damon Knight, The Analog Man, originally written in the mid-50s and published by Barclay. This is the 1967 Sphere reprint. The Wild Shore by Kim Stanley Robinson. This is the first novel from Robinson, and looking at it, I think it is the first paperback printing of this novel as well. So happy to pick this one up, going for cheap. Michael Scott Rowan, The Anvil of Ice. Not an author I'm familiar with, but I was just taken in by the cover. It looks great. It looks like it might be fun. I shall let you know in due course. What with Giant April occurring this month, and as one of my Easter Edgars, I was happy to pick up this science fiction hardback Planetoid 127 by Edgar Wallace. And in readiness for later in the year, when as part of Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, this book is being read, Typee by Herman Melville. I hear good things from people who have read this. I have, of course, read Moby Dick. I've also read The Confidence Man and a few short stories. I suppose most notably his most famous short story, Bartleby the Scrivener. This is his first or second work, so I'm going to be interested to take a peep at Polynesian life with him. On a book haul last month, I managed to find a book called Don't Mr. Disraeli, which looked to be a sort of satire, mishmash or pastiche of literature of the Victorian age. So it was odd this month to find what is, I think, a book written after that book, but dealing with a time before that book, and that is No Bed for Bacon by Carol Brahms and S.J. Simon. This next book is an author I know nothing about, but the cover just absolutely sang to me. This is 1.2 Billion by Mahesh Rao. I do not read. I was going to say enough, but I'm just going to say any modern short stories from India. So let's correct that. And lastly is a non-fiction book that normally I would have just probably skipped past, but Book Chat with Pat had mentioned this book in a review for the BookTube Prize reading that she was doing for non-fiction books, and it was a very new book on sale for £1, and I could not resist it. And this is David Grann's The Wager. David Gran, more famous now probably because another of his books has been filmed by Scorsese recently. But this tells the story of some shipwrecked sailors returning to the motherland with a particular tale of how they managed to survive, lauded as heroes, and then 6 months later followed by another group of even more bedraggled shipwrecked sailors saying that they have a very different story. The first weekly prompt of Horror Mayhem is local horror. Now I'm hoping a half-hour drive still counts, because I have chosen as the local ghost story writer, if not out and out horror, E.F. Benson. This is a collection of ghost stories. This is in the British Library Tales of the Weird series, edited by that man again, Mike Ashley. E.F. Benson was a writer primarily of satire and humorous books from the Edwardian to the post-war age, but also celebrated for his supernatural and ghost stories. I also managed to pick up a biography of E.S. Benson, as he's the author that I'm going to be looking at, and for reasons which will become apparent when I do my video on E.F. Benson, I also bought In This House of Bread or Breed by Rumour Godden. And these final books are just ones I managed to pick up from local shops, or even a couple from the local Tesco and their charity shelf they have at their exit. And these are Joe Haldeman's Worlds, David Brin's Startide Rising, the first volume of Stephen King's Dark Tower series, The Gunslinger, the sequel to a book, The Lives of Lockamora, which I mentioned in my Spring into Adventure tag last month. This is Red Seas on the Red Skies by Scott Lynch. And finally, a book in, I would say, a genre that I hardly ever buy, and I think that other people hardly ever buy. It's the reference book genre. And this is the Penguin Guide to the Superstitions of Britain and Ireland. It's chunky enough and is going to be a great one to dip into, especially when I'm going to be looking at a number of ghost stories, and they may well have instances where a superstition takes centre stage. Getting the historical context for that might be a bit of fun. But that was April. Special mention to the book I ordered from Amazon with my birthday gift card, which never arrived. Some of these books I'll be reading very shortly. Some of these books will sit on this shelf and silently mock me. But until next time,